All right. So let me just cover ground as quickly as possible, and then Kevin, don't forget to teach us.
I've got something. I've prepared something.
Okay, good. Let me just cover quick ground, and I'm going to get straight to it. Okay. So what we're dealing with now is we're dealing with a proof for Rav Yosef's position that an armed bandit is classified as a thief. Now, before we get into this, I think I remember mentioning to you in Bava Kamma in the 93rd daf in Aleph, there's a Tanaic dispute about this. Okay. In other words, what is the status of a renter? Is it like a paid custodian or unpaid custodian? Rabbi Yehuda in Bava Kamma 93a said the rent has the status of a paid custodian. Why? Well, because he derives benefit from the rented item. Although he paid for that benefit, he still gets benefit, which is why he's renting it. And therefore, if he's deriving benefit, then he's like a paid custodian who derives benefit from being paid money. In this case, he's receiving benefit from the article. Rabbi Meir doesn't hold like that. Rabbi Meir holds that it's like the unpaid custodian because, he's not getting paid for this. If anything, he's paying. So you can actually understand it from both perspectives. And it's important to have this as the backdrop to understand what's going on in the Gemara. Because we were still at the proof to try and say, listen, is there other people that prove?
It looks like he's... There you are. Damon, you 10 seconds there.
Did I delay?
You were frozen for 10 seconds.
You were frozen for more, about 30 seconds or more.
Oh dear. Just hang on a second. Let me just
retrace your steps, your vocal steps.
Just network as well, Damon.
Yeah, it seems that the network's okay because I'm using a tethering hotspot. I'm just going to repeat what I said for 1 sec. Is that we want to know the status of a renter. Is it like a paid custodian or an unpaid custodian? Rabbi Yehuda said it's like a paid custodian because at the end of the day, he's deriving benefit, not receiving benefit in terms of money, but he's receiving benefit because he's hiring a piece of equipment he needs. Okay? And Rabbi Meir says, well, what are you talking about? That's not how I see a renter. A renter basically is paying you. So therefore, he's like an unpaid custodian because he's doing you a favor. You're also earning money from him. So therefore, even though it's symbiotic, you can't hold him as responsible as a paid custodian because you're also deriving benefit. So that's the Tanaic dispute. So how does this relate to Rav Yosef? Is we need to prove that there is also another opinion or a more general consensus that an armed robber is considered a thief. Because if an armed robber is considered a thief, then an armed robber you would have to pay the twofold payment if you were caught lying about an armed robbery. Why? Because an armed robbery is an ones, and an ones is something which the paid custodian, as well as the unpaid, obviously, because he's got less responsibilities, off the hook. But for normal theft, a paid custodian is responsible. So remember that Rav Yosef had to turn around and say that if it's a paid custodian, the only way we can see that he'd be off the hook with an oath is if he considered an armed robber like an armed robber like a thief, which means that if he was caught lying about the oath, there would be a double payment due. And this has to follow Rav Yochanan, because obviously Rav Yosef can't argue with Rav Yochanan. That's the basis. So we're trying to find the proof for Rav Yosef. So the Gemara adduces the proof that an armed bandit is classified as a thief. What does it say? Shall we say that the following brisa supports it? If one rents a cow from his friend and it was stolen, and the renter said, I shall pay and not swear, and afterwards the thief was apprehended, the thief makes the twofold payment by the renter. Why? Because at the end of the day, the renter could technically do it off the hook. You must remember, Kevin, you're falling asleep and Arthur disappeared. You did drop off a sec, but it's not a problem.
Okay.
Arthur's there.
Split second.
Okay. So
Dan, they're not falling asleep. I'm hearing every word. Don't worry.
Renter.
Not
You're talking about a renter, Damon.
Yeah, okay. All right. Perfect. So, guys, this is what I'm trying to say, is that at the end of the day, I'm renting a cow from Kevin, and I could get off the hook if I'm a renter, according to Rav Yochanan, who sees a rent as a paid custodian. And the only way I could get off the hook is if I claimed I was robbed at gunpoint. Okay, but this particular person that's renting is obviously fearful of using Hashem's name in vain, like we should all be, and says, listen, I know I never stole it, but I'm not even using Hashem's name to take an oath. That's how much reverence he has for Hashem's name, even though he's entitled to. So he decides, listen, thing disappeared under my watch. It's an honest, it's an unavoidable accident. And I'm not legally responsible, but I'm not prepared to use Hashem's name in vain. So what I'm going to do, Mr. I'm the renter, Mr. Person who owns the asset, is I'm going to pay you for that asset. And since he's paid for that asset and he did the right thing, when it comes to finding armed robber, then what absolutely happens in that case is that armed robber would have to pay the twofold penalty to the renter, because now the renter has acquired the benefit of that asset. So if it's found in possession of a third party, it doesn't go back to the original owner, because again, the original owner could have landed up in trouble, because the renter could have just gotten off the hook with an oath, because he did such a good thing and used Hashem's name, not to want to use Hashem's name in vain, that if there's any twofold payment and they do eventually find the armed robber, in that particular case, who benefits? The one that didn't want to take Hashem's name in vain and paid for that article anyway. So it happens to be his benefit. And the person can't turn around and say, well, that twofold payment is actually mine. No, because what would have happened had they not found an armed robber? Guy could have gotten off the hook and not paid you anything. Be grateful you got your initial sum. He did over and above the call of duty. Get what I'm saying? So, well, how do we know this is a paid custodian? Simple. So the students who adduced this proof made the following assumption. They thought this brisa accords with Rabbi Yehuda, who said a rent is treated as a paid custodian. And this is the proof that's developing for Rav Yosef's position. Since the brisa taught and the renter said, I shall pay and not swear, it implies that if he wanted to, he could have exempted himself from liability by taking an oath. Now, what is the circumstance in which a renter, if he's treated as a paid custodian according to Rav Yehuda, could exempt himself where the article was stolen? Guys, we all know it's only when he makes a claim of theft by an armed bandit. Yet the brisa states, and afterwards the thief was apprehended, he makes the twofold payment to the renter. Learn from here that an armed bandit is a thief, for only a thief as opposed to a robber makes the twofold payment. So it wants to use this as a proof for Rav Yosef that an armed robber is classified as a thief. That makes sense. Now, just judging from the work that Arthur has done with Rabbi Ron Cohen, because he's ahead of us, Arthur, is this a good proof or not a good proof?
Yeah.
I need some
Danny,
help.
yeah, stop by me.
I like your hat.
Danny, out. Danny, I'm on the show.
Okay. Saved by
I'm
that.
better on my bike.
I get it.
I'm better on my bike.
I get it, but listen, you've got a lot on your plate. Both literally.
I have actually 4 slices of toast.
I was going to say. Figuratively. So Arthur's off the hook by Rav Danny. Okay, good. So, guys, I'm opening this up to the floor. Is this a good proof or is this a bad proof, and why? Gavin?
Not quite yet today.
Yeah.
All right.
What is the proof again? Just say it again, Damon. Yeah, it's also
Say it again.
I switch on and off between
Okay.
focusing and not focusing. Just please repeat.
So basically, what the students that obviously we're talking about students probably in the Tanaic period, because now if I'm a student and I have an opinion, Nobody cares. So we're obviously talking about real students here. Is that they thought that the Brisa quotes with Rabbi Yehuda. And what does Rabbi Yehuda say? That a renter is treated as a paid custodian. So what we're dealing with here is a renter. And the renter, if he's treated as a paid custodian, could have got off the hook if you rent a cow and it disappeared. Okay? All he has to do is take an oath. But he's not off the hook a paid custodian for theft or loss. He's only off the hook for what, guys? What is he off the hook for? If he takes an oath.
For
Acts of nature.
yeah,
Well, not an act of nature. That's something a little bit different because that could constitute a loss, like being hit by lightning. Or that's an unavoidable. Let's call it acts of nature and acts of man beyond your control. Let's call it an honest. It's an unavoidable accident, meaning...
I was going to say anything beyond your control.
Anything beyond your control. Gavin gave the perfect definition. Why is lost your control? Because how did it get lost if you were watching it? How did somebody steal it if you were watching it? It means you took your eye off the ball. But if somebody holds a gun to a person's head and says, I'm going to take this from you, well, what are you going to do? So in that case, a paid custodian is off the hook based on an honest. But in order to prove that he's not falsely saying he got robbed at gunpoint, people are very afraid to take oaths with Hashem's name. Very afraid. Because they knew who Hashem was in those days. So they're not gonna perjure themselves before Hashem. So therefore, what happens is that they're made to take an oath to prove that they're not lying about it. So this paid custodian is off the hook. Right, sponsored by the SPCA for animal cruelty. Those cats are like snakes with fur.
Trying to eat my cheese. Believe me, he's lucky he didn't get killed.
Fair enough.
His name's Ganef, okay? Ganef means thief. You need to study Bava Kamma about stealing.
That's
My
fair
cat.
Fair enough. It's a mazik, it's a damager. Exactly. So guys, what we're saying is here is the guy decided to do, Kevin and Gavin, the guy decided to do the right thing. He could have got off the hook by taking an oath. And he knows he didn't steal it. But he doesn't want to use Hashem's name in vain, even though he can. Why? Let's look at it like this. Remember on Yom Kippur, there's a thing saying, you don't have to state that using Hashem's name and take an oath for something that's obvious. You don't have to say a tree is a tree. Remember that? We learned that. You don't have to say a tree. In other words, even if you're saying something true, try and have reverence not to use Hashem's name in vain. There's no reason for it. So this guy has got such reverence that Sadiq, who's renting from this person, he knows he never stole it. He said, look, let me rather pay you out. I could get off the hook by taking an oath. I never lied. Let me pay you. I don't want to use Hashem's name in vain. What happens then is 2 weeks later, they apprehend and arrest at Bramley police station a couple of guys, and they find that the armed robber were doing a spate of robberies in the Waverley area. And one of the guys here is linked to that particular robbery. So then if it's according to the students, according to Rabbi Yehuda, and it's seen as a paid custodian, this would seem a proof for Rav Yosef. Why? Because the armed robber would have to pay twice, both the compensatory amount and the penalty. And who does he pay it to in this case? The renter. Why? Because the renter could have got off the hook with an oath, but he didn't. He did the right thing. So now the original owner was paid out. So he's not entitled to the double payment. The person that didn't want to take Hashem's name in vain and paid for the article, he gets the benefit if there's a double payment. Why? Because he could have ended up not apprehending, they're not apprehending the armed robber, and therefore he could have been out of pocket. So the original owner can't turn around and say, well, that compensation is mine, because he could have landed up in deep trouble where he would have been out of pocket and the guy just had to take an oath. Do you see that, Gav?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to ask you something. What I don't understand, it's not what I don't understand. I'm just saying, isn't the fact that he isn't it sort of an admission of guilt by him not taking the oath? Like, I mean, I would think that if even if he's a tzaddik, I don't know the guy, he's renting from me, and if he's not prepared to take the oath and he pays it just by default or just on his own volition, I would think that the guy's guilty. That's why he's paying.
You know what, Gavin? You wouldn't care as long as you got your money back. You could say either way is a tzaddik. Is it tzaddik gamor? Is a tzaddik even of his generation, even higher? Why? Because the worst is, if his conscience is clean that he doesn't want it and he stole it and he makes good, what do you care? He still has respect for Hashem. If he didn't steal it and he doesn't want to even more so use the name of Hashem, he's the bigger tzaddik. Either way.
No, agreed, but 100%. But in a way, it tarnishes his name, because I would be suspicious of a guy who wouldn't take an oath. I'm just saying I would be. That's me personally.
Well, you know what? If he made a statement and turned around and said, listen, I believe I'm innocent, but I don't want to use it, you could give him the benefit of the doubt, or you could make him guilty. I don't think it would tarnish his reputation for one reason. It would go around town that he's not prepared to use Hashem's name. And therefore, anybody would trust him as a custodian because he'd make good. Whether he stole it, he still doesn't want to use Hashem's name. Either way.
I think what you're saying was more valid in those days than probably it is today.
Please. Today, everybody's a pathological liar. You've got mafia.
Give me 1 second. I've got to turn something over. Give me 1 second. It really won't take long. Give me a second.
He's got an old leaf.
No, really, it wasn't
Damon.
me. No, really, it wasn't me.
Damon.
Yeah?
He has an old leaf. He's in the apartment. He needs to turn over.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
No, it's fine. It's not bad. Really good. Have to turn them over halfway.
Okay.
Right, we need to finish. Maybe another 20 minutes. Sorry, guys. Carry on. I apologize.
No problem. So this is what we're saying. We're saying either way, is this a proof for Rav Yosef? Is this a proof? Because the students are saying this is by Rabbi Yehuda, this Bryce, and therefore it proves that he's a paid custodian. And the only way that the paid custodian is off the hook is with the armed bandit story. And here we're saying, listen, if you have somebody that's prepared to pay rather than take an oath, then should they find the armed bandit afterwards, he gets the full benefit, because actually the original owner would have been stuck if the guy took an oath, and he wouldn't have got anything. So you can't get greedy after the original owner. That's what the Bryce is a separate issue, but it's trying to prove Rav Yosef's case. And I'm saying, is it a good proof to Rav Yosef, yes or no?
I'm missing something. That's why I missed it the first time as well. Sorry. Just backtrack. Just like maybe two.
Okay, there's an argument with a buyer and an argument with Rav Yosef. What is that argument? Just try and see if you remember.
No, the argument I know. I more or less know what's going on. I just don't understand what the last part. I think I missed 1 or 2 lines twice now. The argument that's going on is that Rabbi Yochanan, he's of the opinion that what's it called, a thief and a robber are identical, whereby Rabbi, who's the other one?
No, not Rav Yochanan, Rabbi Yosef. You see, no. Stop.
Rabbi Yosef.
Hang on a second. What happened was a buyer gave a proof to Rav Yosef, and he said, look, we both hold by Rav Chia bar Abba, who said in the name of Rav Yochanan, one who asserts a claim of theft by thief with respect to a lost object that he found, when in fact he stole it himself, pays the twofold payment. Now, if you should think that one who watches a lost object is treated as a paid custodian, why does he pay the twofold payment? He should be liable to pay the principal immediately, even if his claim is true, because a paid custodian has to pay whether it's lost or stolen. And it was at that point that Rav Yosef said to a buyer, listen, I consider an armed bandit, a gazlan, to be the same as a gunner, a thief. Why? Because both of them hide from people. So I say that he doesn't have to pay the principal. Twofold payment, he doesn't automatically have to pay the principal. He could get off with an oath. But if he's caught lying, in that particular case, he has to pay the twofold payment. Okay? And so we're now trying to find evidence as to another brisa that proves that a renter is a paid custodian, which is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. There's nothing to do with Rav Yochanan. And what it's saying is the students that read this brisa, obviously in those days they were holding at a level, and they said that the author of this brisa was Rabbi Yehuda. And we know that Rabbi Yehuda holds a renter as a paid custodian. And that would seem then a proof for Rav Yosef. Why? Because it says if you rent a car and you don't want to take the oath and you pay, fine. 2 weeks later, they found out there's a group of armed bandits. Then you as the renter that didn't want to take the oath and you paid anyway, just to do the right thing, you now are to get the good windfall of that twofold payment, not the original owner, because you could have left him high and dry by just taking an oath. So he can't complain that you getting the windfall because he's lucky to have gotten anything. Just so happened to turn out that they found the thieves. What if they didn't? So this would seem a proof for Rav Yosef that a paid custodian is that it's a paid custodian would seem to, that an armed robber pays the penalty. Why? Because it says in this Gemara that the students say that the only time that a paid custodian would get off the hook is if he was held up at gunpoint, and the very fact that he got the twofold payment seems to prove Rav Yosef's case that an armed robber is seen as a thief. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Okay. Now I heard you now. Yeah. Thank you.
Because it says,
I didn't get that 1 or 2 lines that you just spoke now. Thank
sure.
you.
So it says, since the brisa taught and the renter said, I shall pay and not swear, it implies that if he wanted to, he could have Gavin exempted himself from liability by taking an oath. Now, what are the circumstances in which a renter, if he's treated as a paid custodian, could exempt himself where the article was stolen? It's only where he makes a claim of theft by an armed bandit. Yet the brisa states, afterwards the thief was apprehended, he makes a twofold payment to the renter. Learn from here that an armed bandit is a thief, for only a thief as opposed to a robber makes a twofold payment. Now I'm asking you if it's a good proof.
I think it's decent.
Okay. Kev, think it's decent?
Yeah. I suppose so, yeah.
Okay, well, there's 2 flaws with this. The first one is you're making 2 leaps of faith here. The first one is there's a leap of faith to say that it holds by Rav Yochanan's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that a renter is a paid custodian. The students said it was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, but others could say it has Rabbi Meir's opinion. And Rabbi Meir's opinion is a renter is an unpaid custodian. And why would that be a proof? Because an unpaid custodian is off the hook for theft or loss. Which means if a normal thief was caught by article 2 weeks later, and the unpaid custodian could have got off the hook, but instead he paid rather than using Hashem's name, then obviously if they apprehend the thief, the unpaid custodian gets the windfall of the double payment, not the original owner, because the unpaid custodian didn't have to pay for it. He's off the hook for theft, but he did. So this is not a proof. All it's saying is that the students say it holds by Rav Yochanan. Then it's making the inference that therefore it's proving that it's a paid custodian. And therefore, if it's saying that there's a twofold payment for a thief, the only way it could hold that is if you hold that an armed robber is like a thief, therefore the twofold. There's 2 leaps of faith there. One that it's Rabbi Yehuda's, and the other one is that the only way you could pay is by automatically assuming that a thief is that an armed robber is a thief. What you could say is something completely different. You could say that maybe it's holding by Rabbi Meir, right? And Rabbi Meir says, look, a rent is an unpaid custodian. So any regular act of theft, there would be a twofold payment to the original owner. If this particular unpaid custodian did the right thing, didn't want to take an oath, even though he knew to steal it, and paid the original owner, he's entitled to the benefit of the windfall should they apprehend it. It's not a proof for Rav Yosef. Okay, so that's what the Gemara comes to refute that. So it says, the Gemara refutes the proof by rejecting the premise on which it was based. They said, why do you think that the Tana of this brisa follows Rabbi Yosef, who said that a rent is treated as a paid custodian? Perhaps he agrees with Rabbi Meir, who said that a rent is treated as an unpaid custodian. If so, the brisa could be discussing theft by an unarmed thief. He's certainly liable to the old payment. Okay? So it's not a proof. So the scholars who adduced the proof, I'm cutting it off. Okay. The scholars who adduced the proof assumed the brisa followed the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara is saying, okay, so let's assume that the scholars are right, and let's see how we can retain that position and still refute them. So if you want to refer to say, guys, that the attribution of the opinions in the dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is as they were reversed by Rabbi Bar Ahuva. Okay, so Rabbi Bar Ahuva said the opposite. Okay, what did he say is the opposite? Is the Gemara in Bava Kamma 93a turned around and said Rabbi Yehuda sees the renter as a paid custodian, Rabbi Meir sees the renter as an unpaid custodian. Rabbi Bar Ahuva said it's the other way around in Bava Kamma 93a. He said that Rabbi Yehuda sees the renter as an unpaid custodian, and basically Rabbi Meir sees him as the paid custodian. So they say, okay, let's say that's right, and you want to switch it around, okay, in terms of that opinion, okay? Then all you say is like, how does a renter pay? In other words, what is the level of custodial responsibility? So in other words, Rabbi Meir said he's treated as a paid shomer. Rabbi Yehuda said he's treated as an unpaid shomer. According to this version of the dispute, proof can be refuted by attributing the brisa of Rabbi Yehuda in the same way as it was originally refuted through the attribution of Rabbi Meir. So all it's turning around and saying is that, look, if you want to reverse the positions, all you have to do is turn around and say that Rabbi Yehuda sees it as an unpaid custodian according to Rabbi Bar Abba. And it means that anybody that stole the article has to make the twofold payment. And who did they make it to in this case? The renter, because the renter didn't have to pay. He could have taken an oath to get him a film. But instead he replaced the object. So it's the renter's benefit. If the renter decided not to pay and decided to take the oath, then the original owner would get that benefit windfall when they apprehend the thief. That's all it's saying. So this isn't a proof for Rav Yosef at all. It's only a proof if you want to say that the brisa holds according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now it's saying, all right, let's even get more technical. What happens if we keep the original position? In other words, follow the main discussions in the Gemara that hold Rabbi Yehuda sees the renter as a paid custodian and Rabbi Meir as an unpaid custodian. How would you reject the? In other words, how do we still say it doesn't support Rav Yosef? Which is interesting, right? Because if you want to say it's according to Rav Yosef and it's a paid custodian, it would seem to be a proof of Rav Yosef because we say a thief, you're off the hook, so it must be an armed robber. So we're saying, no, there is a way to refute it. How do you do that? Is Rabbi Zera said, what are we dealing with here? Where the renter made a claim of theft by an armed bandit, which could have actually exempted him from liability. Okay? But the bandit was then found to be unarmed, and then, in which case he's subject to the twofold payment. In other words, the renter claimed that the robber was armed. He consequently could have exempted himself completely by swearing, even if he had the status of a paid custodian. But he chose to pay for the article, and therefore he acquired it. So then when the robber was caught, and he was then discovered to be an unarmed thief, only at that point he would incur the twofold payment. Meantime, the renter has already acquired the stolen object. Why? Because he decided to pay for it and not take the oath. And therefore he's entitled to the double payment. So Rabbi Ran Cohen gives a perfect example. Okay, Kevin, this is the example Rabbi Ran Cohen gives. So he says, look, if it was an armed robber, guess what? There's no twofold payment. This is not a proof according to Rav Yosef. But when they found the armed robber and they take him into questioning, he said, I never robbed this guy by gunpoint. It was a water pistol. It looks like a 9mm. It's a water pistol. And I was covering my face, etc. So, I'm not a robber. I'm actually a thief. And since he's a thief, he pays the twofold payment because he was caught by witnesses. And therefore, the renter benefits because he could have taken the oath to take him off the hook with the original owner. But since he paid for it with a good conscience, he gets the double payment benefit from a normal thief, but not from an armed robber. And therefore, this is a proof not for Rabbi Yosef at all, but for a buyer. You get what I'm saying? So, in other words, it's no proof at all. It's not a proof for Rav Yosef, and it's not a proof for a buyer. It's inconclusive. That's the bottom line. Now, on this note, Kevin, will you teach us unless you guys have any questions?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not going to do a screen share. I'm just going to document here. And today was the fast of Tevet.
Yes.
It's a month of Tevet where some bad things happened or negative things happened to the Jewish people, and it was the culminating in the destruction of the Second Temple. So just give a few points here. It says Jerusalem was on the 10th of Tevet. The armies of the Babylonian Emperor Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem. And it says here the Jewish people never repented, and 30 months later, on the 9th of Tammuz, the walls of the Second Temple were breached, and on the 9th of Av, which is Tisha B'Av, the temple was actually destroyed. Another different aspect of it is non-historic aspect, just a practical aspect. It's the only time a fast, one of the fasts besides Yom Kippur, obviously, that can take place on Friday, Erev Shabbat. The other fasts, the other minor fasts, even like the fast of Esther and Tammuz, cannot take place on a Friday. So this one is the exception.
Hang on,
and obviously Yom Kippur.
You're saying that if this occurs on Friday night, you have to fast until from Saturday, not from Friday. Are you serious? Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the only one. I've done it before, and I practically experienced it 20 years ago when I went to Australia for my sister's wedding. The flight was on a Thursday night, and with a time change, I had to fast for another 10 hours. And luckily, I got back. I made it before Erev Shabbos, and I observed. I was able to observe it, but I had to do extra. So I actually did this on a Friday.
Incredible.
And I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure it's happened to us in the past, where it's happened, where it's been on a Friday. Then the second thing is Ezra the scribe passed away on the 9th of Tevet, 1,000 years after the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. So Ezra the scribe, I think he wrote the Mishnah, or he translated. Let's just see. Yeah, very, very important person in Jewish history. Let's just see. Okay, it says here. It was Ezra the scribe led the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. Ezra HaSofer, as you say in Hebrew, led the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel after Babylonian exile. oversaw the building of the second temple, and helped put a stop to the wave of intermarriage that afflicted the Jews at that time. As head of the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, or Men of the Great Assembly, he canonized 24 books of the Tanakh and legislated a series of laws and practices, including formalized prayer, as we know today, Shacharis Mincha Maariv, guaranteeing the continuation of authentic Judaism among the Jewish people to this very day. And one more thing, it says in recent, this is all from Chabad, it's not from Reform LGBTQ Jewish website. Accordingly, in recent times, the 10th of Tevet, people use, say, Kaddish for victims of the Shoah on this day because that's what we can relate to. Even on Tisha B'Av, when we do the, when they do the Kinot and the, and Eicha, and so all the Kinot, the actual Kinot on Tisha B'Av day, during the day after Shachrit, there's a different Kinah written about a different tragedy in Jewish history.
I didn't know that this was
and,
1 minute, nearly finished it.
And every Kinah, and we can't relate to the Crusades and even the Spanish. It's unfortunate. We can only unfortunately relate to the crimes of the 20th century, like the Shoah, that we can relate to, and the pogroms in Ukraine and of the 19th and 20th century. Those, so it says in the note that Kaddish is said in memory of the victims of the Shoah. That's I just found it today. Just thought.
Sure. So that's handy. I've learned things, Kev.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I hope the show
Absolutely.
was all right. Thank you, Kev, for your contribution. I learned some things. Kevin, I hope I explained it all right. I mean, I understood it.
No, you did. It's it's me. I'm not feeling great, so I'm battling to concentrate. I didn't hear that you said 2 or 3 lines. Like you said it twice. I didn't hear it until the third time. I got it.